The red world of Vorus shimmered under twin suns, the air thick with heat and the sound of engines roaring across the distant horizon. The academy stood like a fortress carved from iron, its towers reaching toward the sky as if daring the stars to look down upon them. Cadets from 12 species gathered on the training grounds, their armor gleaming with dust and sweat. They stood in rows, silent and waiting, the scent of ozone and fuel filling the air. Among them stood a human girl, small and unarmored, her uniform too big for her thin frame. Her name was Mara, and she carried herself like someone who had fought to be there, every muscle of her body tense, every breath measured. The instructors moved along the line, their shadows long and sharp. They were not human, they were tall creatures with scaled skin and burning eyes. Their voices echoed through the training yard, cold and precise. They spoke of discipline and honor, of survival and obedience. Their words sliced through the air like knives, but Mara did not flinch. She had heard worse. She had lived through the long journey from Earth, across the trade routes that chewed up weak travelers and spat them out into the void. She had seen the way aliens looked at her soft skin, slow reflexes, a species still learning how to survive beyond its fragile planet. The instructor stopped in front of her, his eyes narrow, his mouth twisting into something like amusement. He said nothing, only tilted his head as if studying a strange insect. Mara met his gaze, her chin lifting, the smallest defiance in the largest crowd. She would not lower her eyes, not here, not now. The other cadets towered over her armored bodies, breathing with quiet mechanical rhythm, their claws and tails twitching. Some glanced at her with open disdain, others with curiosity, but none with respect. She could feel it crawling over her skin, the unspoken belief that she did not belong. The heat pressed down upon them until even the metal beneath her boots felt alive. She focused on her breathing, steady, slow. She would not faint. She would not show weakness. She remembered the voice of her father telling her once that courage was not a roar, it was the refusal to bend, and she held that memory. Like a blade the whistle blew, sharp and sudden, the sound slicing through her thoughts. The cadets turned toward the gates of the arena that loomed ahead. Their training commander barked orders in a language thick and guttural, and the translator, in her ear, struggled to keep up. Words flickered in static, but she understood the tone. The test would begin soon, her first day, her first trials. The crowd began to move. Mara followed her steps, small but certain, her eyes fixed on the gate ahead. It shimmered with energy, the hum of magnetic locks vibrating through the ground beyond that gate waited. Something unknown, something meant to expose every flaw, every fear. The aliens around her adjusted. Their armor checked, their weapons whispered. Among themselves she walked in silence, her heartbeat loud in her ears. When the gate opened, the light of the twin suns poured across her face. She felt it then, not fear, but a strange calm, the kind that came before the storm she had traveled across galaxies to stand in that heat, surrounded by beings who saw her as nothing but a fragile experiment. But she would show them what a human could become. She would show them that even the smallest creature could learn to growl back against the universe itself. The arena stretched before her like the mouth of a beast, its metallic walls scarred with the marks of claws and fire. The heat shimmered across the floor, bending light into strange shapes. The other cadets formed a wide circle around the center, their shadows long and restless. The instructors stood on raised platforms, their voices carried through amplifiers, sharp and commanding, as they explained the rules of the trial. Mara listened, though her stomach twisted with unease. The words were clear. Each cadet must face the test alone. No weapons, no armor, no aid, only instinct and control. The instructor, named Commander Threx, loomed above the rest, his scaled skin catching the sunlight, his eyes bright with a cruel kind of curiosity. He spoke of courage and the difference between bravery and foolishness. His tone made it sound like he expected the human girl to fail. The other cadets whispered in their own tongues, some snickering, others watching with wary anticipation. No one volunteered to go first, until Threx turned his gaze toward Mara and said, "Humans, step forward." Her pulse jumped, but her feet moved on their own. She stepped into the center of the arena, the metallic floor vibrating beneath her boots. She felt every stair pressing down on her like weight. The gate behind her began to rise, with a low mechanical groan, the sound deep and slow like the breathing of some slumbering creature. A gust of hot air rushed out carrying the scent of dust and fur and something wild. The crowd went silent as the first growl echoed from the shadows. From the darkness, three shapes emerged low to the ground, moving with predatory grace, their hides black and gleaming, their eyes burning with gold light. The alien predator cubs, the infamous trial of Vorus creatures bred to test cadets for fear, control and dominance. Though they were young, they were strong enough to tear through solid metal. Mara had read about them on the flight here, how their kind hunted in silence until the last moment before the strike. She could feel that silence now, heavy and waiting. The cubs fanned out around her, their tails flicking their muscles. Tense, one hissed low, another pawed at the ground, the third bared its teeth in a silent snarl. Her throat tightened, but she forced herself not to move. She remembered the stories of wolves on Earth, how they tested weakness by looking for a flinch. So she did not flinch. She stood still, her eyes locked on the largest of them, her breathing steady, her mind screaming that she was outmatched. The commander called out from above, "Calm them, or be removed from training." His tone made the word removed sound final. The air trembled with growls. Her heart pounded louder than the crowd. She whispered, to herself barely audible, "Hold steady, hold steady." The cubs closed in. The largest one stepped forward, its teeth gleaming in the sunlight. It growled deep and low. The sound rolled through the arena like thunder, and though every part of her wanted to run, she only lowered herself slowly into a crouch. The crowd murmured confusion, disbelief. Her hands pressed against the floor to steady herself, dust rising around her. She met the beast's eyes. The same golden fire staring back at her. She could smell its breath, hot and sharp. She could see the intelligence behind its rage, and in that moment, she understood something. This was not a battle of power. It was a test of heart. She let out a breath that trembled through her entire body, and waited for the next move, knowing that the real trial had just begun. The growl filled the arena again, deeper this time, like the rumble of a storm about to break. The largest cub lowered its head, its shoulders rolling with tension. The other two began to circle, their eyes fixed on Mara, like predators studying prey. The crowd stood still, not a single voice daring to speak. Even the wind seemed to vanish, leaving only the pulse of danger hanging in the air. Mara felt her knees shake, but she locked them steady, forcing her body to obey her will. She remembered the instructor's words, "Control yourself or the beasts will control you." Her breathing slowed, her focus narrowing, until all she could hear was the rhythm of her own heartbeat. The cub lunged, not in attack but in warning claws, scraping sparks from the metal floor. She did not move. Her body screamed to run, but she stayed rooted to the ground. Her instincts fought her mind in a furious storm. She clenched her fists, the metal biting into her palms. She had faced bullies on Earth, faced hunger, faced the endless silence of space on her journey here. She would face this. To her voice rose before she even realized what she was doing, low and rough. It began as a whisper, then grew into a sound raw and primal. She growled back. The echo rolled across the arena, bouncing off the walls like thunder. The instructors froze. The cadets gasped. The cubs stopped mid-step, their golden eyes wide with confusion. No one had ever done that before. No one had ever dared to answer them in their own language. The largest cub tilted its head, its breath hissing softly. It growled again, quieter, this time as if testing her. She met its gaze and growled once more. Steady, strong, her voice vibrating with defiance, and something older than fear. The silence that followed stretched until it hurt. Then the cub took a step closer, its claws clicking against the floor, its nostrils flaring as it sniffed the air around her. It was close enough now that she could see her reflection in its eyes, the reflection of a trembling girl trying to stand against something far greater than herself. And yet something in the beast seemed to shift. Its growl softened into a low hum, one that carried curiosity rather than threat. The other two cubs hesitated, their tails twitching, their ears flicking back and forth, unsure whether to attack or follow from the stand's commander. Threx leaned forward, his voice a whisper of disbelief. He had seen hundreds of trials, but never this. No cadet, not even the strongest, had ever faced the cubs without fear or weapon. The alien cadets began murmuring, their voices rising in waves of disbelief. The human girl was still crouched, still growling, still holding the gaze of the predator. The largest cub moved again, slow, deliberate. It circled her once, twice, then lowered its head. The arena gasped. Mara stayed still, her throat dry, her growl fading into a steady hum, matching the creature's rhythm for a heartbeat. They breathed as one. Then the cub did something no one expected. It touched its snout to her shoulder, a gesture of acceptance, of understanding. The others followed, their growls melting into soft sounds of recognition. The arena was silent, no one moved, no one spoke. The predators had chosen. Mara lifted her head, the fire of triumph in her eyes. Though she said nothing, she knew something had changed forever. The moment would not fade into dust, it would become legend. The human girl, who did not run, who answered the growl, and was answered in arena remained silent, the sound of breathing, and the slow hum of energy. The only things alive in the still air. The cadets did not know whether to cheer or to fear what they had just seen. Commander Threx stood frozen, his scaled hands gripping the rail, as if to keep from falling. Mara rose slowly from her crouch, her muscles trembling from the effort, her eyes still locked on the largest. Cadet stayed close to her, its head low, its tail flicking against the metal floor. The other two paced beside her as if waiting for her signal. The instructors spoke softly to one another, their voices thick with confusion. No one could explain it. The cubs were designed to test fear-not form bonds, yet there they were, circling the human-like loyal hounds. Mara did not smile. She was too stunned to feel pride. She only reached out her hand, hesitating for a heartbeat, before placing it on the warm scales of the nearest cub. Its body rumbled under her touch, a deep, vibrating sound like contentment. The noise spread to the others, and for the first time in the long history of the trials, the predators purred. Commander Threx finally descended from his platform, his shadow stretching across the arena. He approached slowly, his eyes locked on Mara. The cadets stepped back, giving him space. His voice came low and heavy like grinding stone. "Explain yourself, human," he said. "What did you do to them?" Mara swallowed the dryness in her throat, her heart still pounding. She wanted to answer, but she had no words. There had been no plan, no trick, only instinct. "I did what I had to," she said softly, the translator in her ear, buzzing to catch the trembling sound. "I just stopped being afraid." Threx stared at her for a long moment, then looked at the cubs, who now sat beside her, tails curled, their golden eyes bright with something that looked almost like respect. He raised a hand toward them, and one of the cubs growled, a warning sound that made him hesitate. The crowd of cadets gasped at the sight. An instructor threatened by the beasts, he commanded. Threx lowered his hands slowly, and turned his gaze back to Mara. His expression unreadable. He told her to leave the arena, to take the cubs, if they followed her, and report to the command hall at dusk. Mara nodded, unsure whether this was a punishment or an honor. She turned and walked toward the gate, her steps uncertain. The cubs rose with her, their heavy paws echoing against the floor. They followed without command, without hesitation. Outside the arena, the sun had begun to fall behind the horizon, painting the metal walls in shades of red and gold. The other cadets whispered as she passed, some in fear, some in awe. She ignored them, her mind spinning with confusion. She had not meant to make history. She had only wanted to survive. Yet the cubs padded beside her, their heads held high as if she were one of their own, and the crowd parted before her. In silence, when she reached the edge of the training grounds, she stopped. The cubs stopped to their glowing eyes fixed on her. She knelt in the dust, her hands resting on her knees, the heat of the day fading into cool shadow. She looked at them, and they looked back, and in that strange, quiet moment, she realized that something deep within her had awakened, something that could never be unlearned. The suns dipped below the horizon, leaving the sky drenched in deep crimson light. The shadows of the academy stretched long across the ground, and the air cooled into stillness. Mara sat near the edge of the training compound, the cubs resting beside her, their bodies warm and heavy, their breathing slow. She traced circles in the dust with her finger, trying to make sense of what had happened. She could still hear the echo of their growls in her chest, not as threats, but as something ancient and alive, something that had recognized her. The cubs stirred occasionally, their eyes flickering open, their golden light glinting in the dark. One of them shifted closer, pressing its head gently against her arm. She froze, afraid to move, then slowly relaxed, letting her hand rest on its rough scales. It purred again, that strange deep vibration that seemed to settle her racing thought. She had read once that predators only trusted those who understood them without words. Maybe that was what she had done. She had stopped thinking and started listening. In the distance, the academy lights blinked on cold white orbs that floated above the buildings, casting long beams across the sand. Cadets moved between the structures, whispering, their voices carried by the wind. She could hear her name among them, the human girl, the one who growled back. Some said it with fear, others with respect. She could not tell which meant more to her. She only knew that everything had changed in a single heartbeat, and she had no idea what would happen next. When the night horn sounded, a low rumble that signaled curfew, she rose, the cubs lifting their heads as if awaiting command. She hesitated, unsure whether to bring them, but when she started walking they followed. Without question, their steps silent, their movements fluid like living shadows. As she entered the corridor leading to the command hall, the guards at the door froze, their weapons lowering in confusion. No one had ever seen the cubs obey anyone, let alone follow a human. Inside the hall, Commander Threx waited, his scaled face caught in the glow of the projection screens. Around him, his golden eyes unreadable. The other instructors stood behind him, their arms crossed, their gazes sharp. Mara stopped. In the center of the room, the cubs flanking her like guardians. Threx studied the sight for a long time before speaking, his voice low. And even the creatures have chosen you, human. That has never happened before. Mara stood silent, unsure whether to answer. Threx continued, you have shown courage that defies logic, but you have also broken the balance of this academy. The cubs were meant to challenge, fear not, bond with it. Now they will not listen to anyone else. You have a choice. You can stay and train alone under my command, or you can leave with them into exile beyond the academy walls. The room fell silent, the hum of machinery the only sound. She looked at the cubs. They stared back, unblinking. She felt no fear, only certainty. Whatever they were, whatever had begun between them, it was real. She turned her gaze back to Threx and nodded. I will stay, she said quietly. Threx regarded her for a long moment, then nodded once, his expression hard to read. Very well, human, your training begins. At Donna's, she walked out. The cubs padded beside her, their tails swaying in rhythm. The night wind carried the sound of distant engines, and she felt the pulse of something greater, waiting just beyond the stars, a promise or a warning. She could not yet tell. The first light of dawn crept over the horizon, painting the sky in silver and gold. The academy stirred with the sound of engines warming and cadets gathering for morning drills. The air smelled of dust and metal and the faint temps of ozone. Mara stood alone on the eastern training field, the cubs at her side, their eyes glowing faintly in the pale light. She felt the weight of every gaze upon her from the barracks windows, from the high platforms where instructors stood in silence. They had all come to see if the miracle of yesterday would hold true under the light of a new day. Commander Threx stepped forward, his movements slow, deliberate, his scales reflecting the rising sun. He said nothing at first, his eyes scanning the cubs, then her, then back to the cubs. As if still unable to believe what he saw, he finally spoke, his voice steady. Today, you will train human, not as one of them but as one of us. Show me that what happened was not chance. Mara nodded once, her throat dry for words. The cubs lowered themselves in unison, their bodies tense but calm, as if waiting for her command. The exercise was simple. On paper, she was to guide the cubs through a series of obstacles using only sound and motion. The other cadets had failed to control them even with command rods. Yet Threx gave her nothing but the open field. She took a deep breath, feeling the rhythm of her heartbeat steadying with theirs. She raised her hand and made a low rumble in her throat, soft and rough. The cubs stirred, their ears twitching. They watched her, and then the first one moved, slipping between the metal posts like liquid shadow. Gasps rippled through the watching crowd. The second cub followed, then the third, moving in perfect rhythm. With her sound, she shifted her tone a fraction lower, and they stopped as one. She raised her pitch slightly, and they began to run, their paws kicking dust into the sunlight. The alien cadets murmured disbelief. Even Threx leaned forward, unable to hide the flicker of wonder in his eyes. Mara did not smile. She only focused deeper, matching her breathing to theirs, her body swaying with each signal until it felt like they were one being. When the cubs finished the run, they turned and padded back to her, their heads low, their golden eyes bright. She knelt, pressing her forehead gently to the nearest one, her hand resting on its snout. The connection pulsed between them, alive and real. She looked up to see Threx watching her silently for a long moment. Then he gave a single slow nod, the kind reserved for warriors, not students. But the moment of quiet did not last. From the far end of the arena, another instructor stormed forward, his armor clanking, his voice sharp with anger. This is not control, he barked. This is contamination. They are predators, not pets. If they turn, she will die. His words cut through the morning air, but Mara did not look at him. She met the cub's eyes, and whispered in a voice the translator could barely catch. They will not turn. They chose me. The cubs growled low, and the instructor took a step back. Threx raised his hand to silence the room, his gaze cold and heavy. She will continue training, he said, no hesitation in his tone. The law of the academy is simple: strength earns its place. As he turned away, the sun broke fully over the horizon, the light spilling across the field, and for the first time since her arrival, Mara felt not like an outsider but like something new, something dangerous and alive. The days that followed blurred into one another under the heat of the twin suns training from dawn to dusk, sweat and dust and the constant echo of growls across the metal plains. Mara moved through it all with the cubs at her side, their presence, a storm of energy and instinct. She learned their rhythms, their moods, their quiet signals, the flick of a tail, the twitch of an ear, each sound a language older than speech. The instructors watched from a distance, careful, wary, yet fascinated. They had never seen discipline take shape through something so raw, so alive. Morning began with silence, then motion. She ran across the field, the cubs flanking her, shadows in perfect sync. She leaped over barriers, rolled beneath beams, crawled through dust while their claws tore paths beside her. Every breath became a bond between species, every movement a vow to survive together. The other cadets whispered her name. Now, not with mockery but with awe. They called her the Beast Whisperer, the human, who became one of them. Yet, beneath the admiration, there was some cadets began to resent her. The alien born to strength could not understand how a fragile creature from Earth had done what none of them could. Jealousy simmered like poison in their hearts. One of them, a broad-scaled fighter named Varric, glared each time she passed. His pride wounded his reputation, fading with each of her victories. One evening, after training as the suns bled red across the horizon, he cornered her, near the supply yard, his voice a low growl. Human, you cheat, you use tricks, not strength. Mara met his eyes, her voice calm. I use trust, not tricks. Varric's tail lashed against the floor, his anger breaking through words. You disgrace the academy by bringing animals into our ranks. He spat on the ground before turning away. But as he did, one of the cubs growled sharp and loud, a sound that froze everyone within earshot. Varric stopped his hand, twitching toward his blade. Threx appeared from the shadows, his voice carrying authority enough. The cubs answer only to her, and she answers to me. Any who challenge that answer will face me directly. The moment shattered the tension. Varric bowed stiffly, his jaw tight, before stalking off into the darkness. Mara exhaled, her knees trembling. She looked to Threx, his golden eyes unreadable. He said quietly, you have strength, girl, but strength attracts envy. Beware those who fear what they do not understand. Then he turned away, leaving her alone. With his words ringing in her ears that night, she sat by the edge of the campfire, the cubs stretched beside her, the flames painting their scales in hues of amber and bronze. The stars shimmered above, endless and cold. She thought of Earth, of the forests she used to walk in, with the sound of wolves echoing through the night. She realized then that she had become something different, neither human nor beast, but a bridge between two worlds. She leaned back, listening to the cubs' steady breathing, their warmth against her side, and for the first time since she left home she felt she truly belonged. When sleep came, it was deep and dreamless, but as dawn neared, a sound woke her, the cubs restless, their eyes glowing brighter than usual, their growls low and uneasy. She sat up, heart pounding. The night wind carrying a strange metallic scent, and in that instant she knew something was coming, something that would test not her courage but her bond with them in ways she could never imagine. The air was heavy before sunrise, the twin moons fading into the pale light of dawn. Mara rose from her cot, the cubs already awake, their ears twitching toward the horizon. The metallic scent from the night before still lingered, sharp and cold, the kind that meant machines and movement. She stepped outside the barracks, her boots sinking into the dust, as the first light revealed shadows in the distance. The sound of engines grew louder, low and steady, until even the ground beneath her feet began to tremble. From beyond the training walls came a convoy of armored vehicles, their hulls, marked with the insignia of the high command soldiers, poured out clad in black armor, their helmets reflecting the dawn light. Commander Threx stood at the edge of the field, his expression carved from stone. He did not turn as the lead officer approached, a towering figure with metal implants gleaming along his skull. The officer spoke with authority dripping from every word. Orders from Central Command. The human and the beasts are to be transferred immediately. The words hung in the air like blades. The cubs growled, their tails lashing. The sound of their claws against the ground filled the silence. Mara stepped forward, confusion and dread knotting in her chest. Transferred to where? She asked, but the officer ignored her. Instead, he raised his gauntleted hand toward the cubs, secured the subjects. He commanded the soldiers, moved quickly, raising stun rifles, the whine of charging energy cutting through the wind. Mara threw herself in front of the cubs, her voice raw. You can't, they are not weapons. One soldier hesitated, but Threx raised his hand. Stop, he ordered, his gaze locked on the officer. What authority brings you here? The officer smirked. Central Command fears what they do not understand. A human who can control predators is an anomaly, and anomalies are dangerous. Threx stepped closer, his voice like the growl of distant thunder. You will not take them, they are part of my command. But even as he spoke, the soldiers spread out surrounding the field. The cubs crouched low, their growls deepening. The largest pressed its body against Mara's leg, protecting her. She could feel the vibration of its anger through her bones. She whispered softly, "No, stay calm," her voice trembling, not from fear but from the weight of helplessness. The first bolt of energy shot across the field. It struck near them, exploding in a flash of blue light. The cubs roared, the sound tearing through the air as they lunged forward, knocking soldiers aside like ragdolls. Chaos erupted, shouts, blasts, dust filling the air. Mara screamed their names, trying to call them back. Trix moved through the haze, his voice commanding, "Stand down, everyone stand down." But it was too late. The cubs had tasted the threat, their instincts unleashed. One soldier fell, another fled. The officer raised his arm to fire again, but before he could, Mara stepped between him and the beasts, her voice breaking. "Stop, they will listen to me." She turned toward the cubs, her hands raised, her breath coming in sharp gasps, her eyes locked on theirs. The largest stopped first, its chest heaving, its growl fading. The others followed, uncertain, their fury giving way to confusion. The battlefield fell silent except for the wind. The officer stared at her, then lowered his weapon, his voice low. "You risk your life for monsters." She met his gaze without blinking. "They are not monsters, they are my pack." Threx stood beside her, the dust settling around them, his voice steady. "Then they stay with her until she falls. And if she does, you can collect what remains." The officer sneered but said nothing as he signaled his troops to withdraw in. The vehicles vanished into the horizon. Mara dropped to her knees, exhaustion crashing through her. The cubs pressed close, their warmth grounding her. She looked at Threx, who nodded once, a rare glimmer of pride in his eyes. "You just made enemies in high places. Human, but you also made history." Mara breathed in the metallic scent of the morning, and whispered, "Then let them come." The day passed under a heavy sky, the suns hidden behind a curtain of dust storms swirling across the plains. The academy was silent, no drills, no laughter, no movement, only whispers that carried like ghosts through the corridors. Mara stayed with the cubs in the empty training field, her body aching, her mind turning over everything that had happened. She knew the High Command would not forget. They would return, and next time, they would not bring stun rifles, they would bring fire. But she also knew she could not run, not while the cubs were bound to her, not while the bond that saved them all still pulsed like a heartbeat between them. Commander Threx found her at dusk, his armor coated in dust, his face unreadable. He stood for a moment, watching the cubs sprawled around her, their golden eyes reflecting the faint light. He said quietly, "They will come for you again. And when they do, you must be ready." Mara looked up the wind, tugging at her hair, her voice steady. "I was born ready," she said, though her hands trembled. Threx stepped closer, his tone low. "You have done what none have done before. You have given beasts loyalty, but loyalty can turn to rage if not guided." He reached into his belt and tossed her a small device, a tracking beacon. "If the time comes and you cannot fight alone, press it." Mara turned the beacon in her hands, the metal cold against her palm. She nodded once, then asked, "Why help me when command stands against me?" Threx's gaze held hers for a long moment before he answered, "Because strength deserves to stand even when the galaxy fears it." Then he turned and walked away, leaving her in the fading light. That night the storm hit the academy full force, lightning cracking through the clouds, thunder shaking the towers. Mara stood at the door of the barracks, watching the sky tear open. The cubs restless beside her, their growls blending with the roar of the wind. She felt the storm inside her mirror, the one outside, wild, uncontrollable, alive. She closed her eyes, remembering Earth, remembering the girl she had been before the stars, before the tests, before the growl that changed everything. She was no longer that girl, she was something new, something untamed. When the storm finally broke, the world felt cleaner, quieter, the air heavy with the scent of rain. The cubs slept, curled around her, their warmth seeping into her bones. She leaned against the wall, staring at the horizon where the first rays of dawn began to push through the clouds, a new light. After the storm, her mind drifted toward what lay beyond the academy, beyond Vorus. Perhaps command would come again, perhaps the cubs would be hunted, but she no longer feared it. She had faced monsters, she had stood before power, and she had not bought. The suns rose, she stepped out onto the training field, her boots sinking into the wet sand. The cubs stretched beside her, their bodies glistening in the golden light. She tilted her head, back and let out a low growl, soft and strong. The cubs answered, their voices rising in harmony, the sound carrying across the empty world a song of defiance and belonging from the command tower. Threx watched the scene, his eyes gleaming with something close to pride. He knew then that the story of the human cadet who growled back would not fade. It would spread through the systems, whispered in the halls of power, as both warning and legend. Mara stood in the light, her pack beside her, her future unwritten, her spirit unbroken, and the universe, for the first time, seemed to listen.